Hi, my name is Doug Gentili. I'm president of James II Association. We are one of the few Christian racial reconciliation nonprofits in the United States, and I am just thrilled that God has given me this calling. But I'm here just to proclaim just amazing how God has blessed me and done miracles. This video is called Great Trials and Greater Miracles. And I'm just going to talk about some of the challenges, amazing things I've had to face in my life, and how God has got me through it because of my faith. Turned me away from cliffs, got me out of some terrible situations. And I want you all to hear what God has done, the amazing miracles. I'm going to start off by by giving a little background. I grew up in the 1960s and early 1970s. I was in college, and it was a time of like free love, drugs, sex, all kinds of things that were outside the Christian worldview. The young people were caught up in that, and I was too. I was not heavily into the sex and drug scene at all, but I was with that crowd. I thought it was really cool. That these people are rebels, and there are a lot of we had a lot of constraints on the youth, which probably a lot of those constraints didn't need to be there. So there was like an angst and a rebellious attitude among the youth, which have very destructive consequences. Where there was a revival among young people accepting Jesus, especially late 60s, early 70s. Came out of California, but it swept across the country because people saw that Jesus was the liberating way, not drugs, not sex. So they found that these destructive lifestyles were leading people to very, very bad situations, toward cliffs. And people were revived, by that faith, and God used Jesus to transform them. And I was one of those. I went to California. I'll talk about the first miracle. I had heard about the gospel. I was a nominal Christian, which a lot of America is. A lot of Americans call themselves Christians because their parents took them to church, or because they kind of believe in God, but they never formed a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I was one of those. I was in college. I had not formed a relationship with Jesus Christ, so I consider myself a Christian. But at the same time, I was hanging out with these people that were doing, ungodly things. So I would. A couple of summers, I went from Columbus, Ohio, where I attended college at Ohio State, and went to California. And during one of those trips, I was hitchhiking all over the place. You don't hitchhike now, but back then it was considered. A lot of people did it, even though there were dangers back then too. People just hitchhiked all over the place. So I was on the Sunset Strip of Los Angeles. And I was hitchhiking because in my sinful wickedness, I saw an ad that said XXX, said strippers. And I said, wow, this must be really cool. So I was going to go down there. It was too far to walk, so it was about 2 miles. So I put my thumb out, and a car stopped. It was a two-door sedan. There were 2 people in the front seat. There was a guy on the right side in the back seat. So I got on the left in the back seat, and so we're driving down the Sunset Strip when all of a sudden the driver turns off, And I said, excuse me, but I'm going straight down the Sunset Strip. Well, the guy in the passenger seat, in the front seat, pulled a gun on us, told us to keep our heads down, took our wallets, terrorized us for about 20 minutes. I mean, it was terror. And, at that point, all the stuff came back to me about how my cousin Drew had been witnessing to me about Jesus, about the truth of the civil rights movement, of how people who were being discriminated against and mistreated were actually singing praise songs and joy songs while in jail. I said, that's not normal. That has to be from a higher power. And I'd heard all this, and this was coming back to me. My life was flashing in front of me, and at that point, I was very blessed because they did let us out of the car. They made us take off our shoes. We wouldn't chase the car, I guess. And and I didn't have a wallet, didn't have any money. I had to have my father wire me some money so I could get back to Columbus. But that was God reaching out to me, and the question came to me: what would have happened if I would have died then? Would I have been reconciled to God, or would I have been separated from God? I mean, it was a riveting experience. So I accepted Jesus. Now there's also, God was teaching me also about responsibilities once we accept Jesus, and what could happen if we get cold, if we backslide. And over the years, I got kind of spiritually lazy. I mean, I was living in Philadelphia and then moved to New York. I wasn't doing terrible things, but I went to church, and I consider myself a Christian. I wasn't reading the Bible very often, once in a while, but my priorities were not God. I mean, I was writing books with curse words in it, and music was important, and things, and God knew that I was getting kind of like floating, drifting away. So He put some circumstances in my life in New York City which I could not handle, and I want you to get some sense of this trial that I faced in New York City, but how God answered this trial. I was working for the mayor of New York. I was working in the economic development section. I was one of the few people who was handling like labor standards and things like that with the Times Square redevelopment, where there were billions of dollars, tax money, but also private money going in. When you have that kind of money floating around, there are good guys and there are bad guys, and you get some bad guys that get their hands on that, and there could be some corruption. Well, if you look at the history, if you look at the history of New York City politically in the late 1980s, leading up to about 1990, you will see these corruption scandals swirling around this mayor's office, and the mayor himself, in fairness to him, probably was not corrupt. I don't think anyone accused him of being corrupt, but there was a toleration of people who were abusing things, and some people got certain benefits, and the implication was it could have adverse health and safety impacts. And so I was one of the people. I was one of the people working of this mayor, and I was with a bunch of coworkers, and since I'd been trained before that, I worked with the federal government before that. I actually went to New York because my wife at the time had a public health service obligation. So I left my federal job to move to New York. And so I was trained as an investigator. So something didn't look right. So I did some research, and and then I just kept my eyes open for people who would come in, you know, because we would have to monitor certain things. We would have to deal with certain people, and there was organized crime involved. No one talked about it, but we all knew, because where there's major construction, you have the mob involved. Okay, so it became very clear, you know, when one of the people started making references to not worrying about it, and then saying something like, "How would you like a, you know, about $100,000 job in a condo or something like that," and it was like, it wasn't like a direct offer, but the implication was clear, and it was just, I mean, I was part of a wave. I saw other people were seeing in other areas, so it's not like I was alone here. You know, there were, you know, different things that were popping up in New York, which, you know, and then the news media got it. So even though my faith was kind of weak at the time, it was strong enough that I knew right versus wrong, and that I could not be a part of that. And you know, and so I reported, first of all, to the City Department investigation. You know, gave them some documents, which I thought showed some not so good things, and I also went to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Met with a guy named Dennison Young and gave him some documents, and lo and behold, I found out that there was other people who had reported this, and the U.S. Attorney was involved, and you know, so it became a big scandal, and you know, and so I resigned my position out of protest. I didn't like make a big scene. I just quietly reported the corruption to the authorities and then just left. Okay, but I was quoted in two newspapers. Okay, because, you know, the whistleblowers, you were found out, and, you know, and got quoted. So I was one of many whistleblowers who got publicity. Okay, one of them wound up dead. I'm not saying he was killed. I'm just saying that it was suspicious. Probably was not murder, but people were wondering. But this was serious stuff, and there were so many repercussions to that. You know, we would get threatening phone calls, like scratching sounds, you know, constantly. I had to, when I was out jogging, I was chased, and people yelled "canary." You know, these were serious people. I was threatened in my own neighborhood, and you know, I had no idea what to do about it. And there was a situation where I had a car, and the front plate of my license plate was taken off the car. I didn't notice it was missing. I got a bill from the City of New York for thousands of dollars of unpaid parking tickets. I mean, it was basically just harassment. Someone had put my license plate on their vehicle and just ran up all these tickets. So when I went to the City of New York to contest all these tickets, which I knew I didn't get, I had to have all the tickets pulled, you know, and again, I had to rely on my investigative background and show the judge that the make and model and color of the car in my registration did not match the make, model, and color of the car that were written on the parking tickets. So she, in her wisdom, took a knife, and I had a big printout of all the tickets that I had, and a long printout, thousands of dollars I owed. She took it and drew a pen through it. "Miss Gentile, you're free to go." No fine, but it gives you an idea of the level of evil and harassment that I was going through. Okay, and at the time, you know, there's a legal issue with one of the family members. I won't get into that, and it was like someone had put a rock on my head. And my social contacts, I had some at church, but since I wasn't really that strong in my faith, I would go to church on Sunday and wouldn't have Bible studies or small groups or anything. I would just go to church and go home. So most of my friends outside of my family, I was raising, I had a small son and then another son on the way at the time, were from my coworkers in the mayor's office. Well, once I was acknowledged as a whistleblower, they shunned me because number one, they thought, well, they could be implemented. Like I was radioactive because I was in that office, and people would wonder if they're whistleblowers too and everything. So I couldn't even talk to my former coworkers. So it got so bad that New York has this hotline counseling office where if you feel like you're going through something which is really over your head, you call. And I called this counselor's office, and I talked for about an hour, and I was like desperate. And then as I was talking, it just came to me who I was in Christ. Everything that a decision I had made for Jesus back in 1971. Many years later, after I'd been spiritually lazy, it came back to me. And I remember I was driving on the Belt Parkway, and it was kind of broken clouds, and I saw this cloud, and it just hit me. It was like an angel. It was almost like God was speaking to me. And I became so broken at that point, and just relied on God, and said, God, you need to get me through this. Okay. Well, I want you to hear some of the miracles that happened once I started embracing God, and Jesus through this trial. Well, the first thing that happened was there was an FBI agent, who I made contact with, and I was not put in the witness protection program, but since I was a whistleblower, they gave us some attention, and they actually identified one of the people who had been harassing me. Actually visited the guy, and he ran out of New York. They actually chased this man out of New York. It was like a guardian angel, and some of this stuff stopped. Okay. Now, another thing that happened is that since I left my job, I wasn't working, for a while. We had family income, and I applied for a security clearance and a federal job, but that took a while. Okay. Well, guess what? I got an offer. I'd go to Washington, D.C. to get me out of there. Okay. And that's not all. God actually gave me a calling. It's like, right about that same time, there was a race riot in Brooklyn, New York, where a black woman had taken a baby into a Korean American deli, and the deli owner thought that she was going to steal something, and actually grabbed her, and there was like everything broke loose because there was some tension at the time because there was some new Korean immigrants. Some immigrants coming in, open stores in the inner city, but not living in the inner city, and so there were some cultural clashes and things like that, which all came to head during this time. It was called the Flatbush boycott. You can look it up online, and that happened right, just shortly after all these scandals were breaking up. Okay, so but also. Before I get into that miracle, all the all the corruption stuff going on and all the whistleblowers, it actually brought reform to the city of New York. The mayor was defeated in his own primary. A lot of these rascals were swept out of office. There was a new mayor. And there were some reforms. There was a reform of the charter of New York City that came. So God had brought a lot of good through that. And some of that positive momentum has continued. You have not had this type of deep scandals since then. Even though we've had several mayors, we've had Democrat, Republican, and Independent, we've not had that level of scandal because there are prayers. But here's the biggest miracle of all those ones. God showed me when there was this race riot that there were churches coming together across racial ethnic lines. There were black churches, Korean, Chinese, Latino. One of my best friends was part of that. He had a church in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, about 2 miles from where I was living. And the churches coming together stopped the riot. And you had black churches, Korean churches, communicating with each other. So you have this core of churches coming together and brought peace and calm to that neighborhood where there was a riot. Okay, not to say that there still isn't racial misunderstanding and still isn't stuff going on, bad stuff, but not the extent it was before. And God just opened my eyes to my calling and just opened the door to my calling in James II Association. That's what opened my eyes to see people that I knew who were involved with bringing this healing by cross-cultural communications. Okay, so my calling was set when I went to Washington, D.C. to do the multi-ethnic ministry part-time. I was working for the federal government, and then later on as my main calling. But here is the biggest miracle of all. Some of those churches that were involved with the healing in the late 80s, early 90s, when you had the Flatbush boycott, you had the Korean church, black churches, white churches, and everything coming together. That church, that group formed a core, which later swept across New York with more and more churches, helped inspire an organization called Movement Day, which is now a huge multinational Christian racial reconciliation movement, which has revitalized 30 cities across the world. That organization had its roots right there when I was watching these brothers and sisters in Christ across racial lines with a strong faith. And and Movement Day is they had a big event here in Washington, D.C. last year. And it just brings me to tears to see how God has worked. Well, there's been other little miracles in my life, but I'm going to give you the last miracle. And this is so amazing, and this is more of a personal nature. In 1999, I was diagnosed with cancer. The way it happened, the way the diagnosis came, was a direct intervention from God, because I did not have any symptoms of this disease. But I would wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning with a message, I need to go see a doctor. And I couldn't understand why, because I felt in perfect health. I was running half marathons and everything. But I need to see a doctor. And so I said, okay. I finally got the idea. Maybe God is telling me something. So I went to see a doctor. And I had a blood test. Doctor said, well, you should have a blood test. We're going to test for, he lists all these potential ailments. And I was 49 years old at the time. And I remember the doctor said to me, Mr. Gentili, we usually, when you're 50, we usually test for the prostate cancer. And I was 49. So I said, oh, well, maybe next year, I'm not 50 yet. And as soon as I said that, it was like a jolt in my body. It wasn't like painful, but I could feel, it was a jolt. I mean, my body was, and almost involuntarily I said, no, check now. It was like the Holy Spirit was like speaking through me, because I wasn't like contemplating, I wasn't like thinking and analyzing, should I, wait another year or should I have it now? It just, bang, it came right out, like instinctively. It was the Holy Spirit. So I had the test, and it showed that I had the cancer. I had prostate cancer. And that began a series of miracles. The first thing is, of course, in my weakness, I was just terrified. I said, I had 2 small kids at home, and I said, what? I mean, and I walked around in a daze for like 3 hours. It was on a Friday afternoon. I met with the doctor, and I was walking around. That Sunday, I went to my church. It was a multi-ethnic fellowship called People of the World. And I just put it to them and put it to God, and I said, I've been diagnosed with cancer, and about 35, 40 people came and prayed over me and everything, and they prayed for like fervently. And within an hour, I had no fear of that disease. I mean, it was uncanny. I had no fear of it, and God just let me through it. And I had a very messy operation, and the doctor said to me, and this is before they had the robotics and everything. He said, you're going to probably have some permanent damage in your body, and you're going to have to be off work for a long time. The operation was October 12th, 1999, and the doctor cleared me to go back to work March 1st. Okay, so I went home. I had tubes all over my body and everything, and then they were removed, and I was supposed to go through convalescence for like all these weeks and everything, and I was supposed to have some damage. I said, well, I don't think there's anything different. Well, November 1st, 2.5 weeks after the surgery, I went out and I felt 100% normal. I mean, and their witnesses, I went over to my small group, and they were shocked. It was like Peter when he was, the Apostle Peter, when he was, the angels brought him out of jail, and he knocked on the door, and in the book of Acts, it shows that this girl, Rhoda, recognized Peter's voice. Said, no, it can't be Peter's voice. It has to be his ghost. No, I mean, and that was their reaction. Said, Doug, you're not supposed to be out here. But I was totally healed. I mean, my body was healed, okay. But lo and behold, God had other plans for me, and this is how I'm going to finish out this video of great trials with greater miracles. Fast forward to 2012. Everything was going great on my job. Okay, my kids had grown. I just got an award from the President of the United States for my accomplishments, and I was doing the multi-ethnic ministry, James 2, as kind of like a side thing. And it was late 2012, and I kept getting these messages again, kind of like when God was telling me to go see a doctor. God was telling me I need to leave the government. I said, what? I said, wait. And so I was kind of like, almost like debating with God. I said, wait, that can't be possible. I mean, I'm feeling great in the job. My boss supports me. I just got all these awards and everything. I can't leave the job and retire. I mean, I was retirement eligible, but I would get a lot less money in my retirement than I was making on the job. And so God had to get my attention again. I was kind of like not paying attention. So God did something pretty drastic. And my family and church people remember the scene very well. There was a time I went into work. It was late November. It was on a Tuesday. That afternoon, so about 4 o'clock, I bought some like a candy bar and some soda. I could not swallow it. I could not swallow it. I went home. I couldn't swallow. The next day, I could not swallow. I mean, I said, wow. I mean, it was like I could not swallow. I had to go into the hospital for infusion. They had to put infusion in an IV for 3 hours to keep me alive. And I was desperate. I said, why can't I swallow? And I had to have it twice. So it all came to a head about 12 days later. I had 12 days without that. I was getting famished. I couldn't eat, and I was being kept alive by IV infusion. And I went into this doctor out in Gainesville, and I said, "Well, doctor, I can't swallow." And this was a God thing. Okay, this had to be a God thing, because when someone is in a desperate situation as I am, they're going to put me in emergency, right? And put me on a feeding tube. So I said, "Doc, I think it's time for a feeding tube." And and the doc, I think, was a Christian. He looked at me and said, "No, you can be okay. Nope, we're not going to do that." And wouldn't you know it, that was on a Friday, okay? And wouldn't you know it, that night, I went home and drank 16 ounces of orange juice. The next day, I got 40 ounces. And what turned it around was that I finally acknowledged, God, you're doing something here. I turned to God and I said, God, you go. God was twisting my arm. I finally said, Uncle, okay. And, and then God just let me. He said, oh, and I got a strong message. You see a doctor again? Okay. And I wasn't fighting this time. It's okay. I went in, went to see my Dr. Derek Gang, great guy, great brother in Christ. And he said, Doug, you had the test done. You have late stage prostate cancer. God had let the cancer come back into my body, late stage. It was in my blood, it was in my bones. And it was clear, that with the side effects from the cancer and then the treatment, how it affected my kidneys, blood pressure and everything, God was saving me, because if I would have stayed on that job with all the stress, with a 9-to-5 job, I could have dropped dead on the job. And I'll never forget, I met with, I was a very close colleague who was a director of the Civil Rights Program for the entire Department of the Interior. And I went into her office and told her about the cancer. And, and she was looking after my, she didn't mean any harm. She was looking after my interests. And she said, well, Doug, if you can hold on 4 or 5 months, you can get disability retirement and get a lot more than you are now. And then God confronted me, well, what's more important, your life or money? Okay? I mean, it's like, yeah, I could have gotten maybe $400 or $500 more a month for the rest of my life if I would have wait a minute now. I could have dropped dead right then. I said, no, ma'am, thank you very much. I know you're looking after me, but in 2 weeks, I'm out. Okay? And here's the last miracle. God has rewarded my obedience by giving me so many ministry successes in multi-ethnic ministry all over the country, just doing outreach and doing local ministry with international students and just making different contacts with different Christian groups around the country. God has, I submitted to him, and God just used me and said, Doug, I've called you out of the government, to keep you strong, to do this racial reconciliation ministries, biblical social justice ministry, and also to show my power, because while you're doing this, you have tumors in your bones, you have tumors in your blood, and I'm under constant treatment that they have side effects. And then, there's another aspect of why God called me out. I had written these books, and I think I mentioned that they were curse words and everything, and in the books and everything. And I asked God, how do you want me to use in my writing thing? And one of the books actually was published. It had a hard, it had a, it was a print copy. It was in Barnes and Noble, at least on their website. I don't know if it was in bookstores, but it was on their website and under a pen name. And I asked God, I said, what about these books? Destroy them. God did not want any of those books to come to light. Any of those old books. So I destroyed those books. Now, the one that I published, I have some old copies sitting around, but I don't tell people about it. So you won't even know the name of the book. I'm not going to tell you because God did not want me to use that book. So I said, okay, God, how do you want me to use my writing talent? So right after I asked that prayer, I was going to the doctor's office, and for some reason, like a 30-year-old outline came to mind with some characters and things. All of a sudden, it was all changed around. I mean, it was like I saw different scenes, different characters. It was all family friendly. And God saying, you're going to write books with no curse words, and it's going to be all Christian themes. And so this book was coming alive, and the scenes were coming. It's like watching a movie, and even the dialogue was coming. I was visualizing scenes. I said, "Okay, God, I know you want me to write this book." So I sat down to write it, and of course I was still, processing. I was still learning what God. I wasn't getting it totally. So I said, "Okay, it'll probably take me about a year to write this book." So I was going to budget time and everything, how to fit in this writing with all the ministry stuff and the cancer stuff and everything. So I sat down to write the book. First day, 15 pages. Whoa, what? And it just flowed. I wrote that book in 23 days, 350 double-spaced pages. That's God. I can't write a book in 23 days. The published book, it took me years to write that book. That's God. And then God had me write a prequel. Okay. And here's the last thing. Here is the last thing. And this is God's power. And again, I wasn't understanding because, from a human standpoint, saying, well, God, you had me write this book, so now I'm going to be famous. I'm going to be like the next Tom Clancy. So yeah, so I envisioned myself as this New York Times bestseller. This and the prequel that I wrote, Roxanne Valley and Cro-Magnon 6, which was the prequel. And so if you're already a published author, there's an unwritten rule in the publishing industry that you automatically get your next book read, But I sent out, you can't send your whole book, to publishers or agents or anything. They won't take it. You have to send like an idea for the book. So I sent the idea. I said, well, I wrote this book. Here's what it's about. That God shut the door of every publisher. No one ever read the book. No one ever asked for it. Or Cro-Magnon 6. That had to be a God thing, because if you're a published author, it's, as I say, it's an automatic in. God wanted me not to make money off this book. And then it came to me, Doug, you're to give these books away. You're to give these books away. And the answer came very graphically after I wrote my third. It was a nonfiction book about racial reconciliation churches, which also I wrote under my pen name Verana. And so I said, this is a nonfiction book. Maybe it'll be different if I send this into the publisher. And God gave me the answer through an agent. And that is, the agent actually read the Jeremiah Chronicles, liked the book, okay? And then she said to me, She asked me a question. Doug, in order for me to take this book to publishers, how many, like, she asked me something, if I had like a big, like hundreds of thousands of fans that would buy the book, I mean, basically, she asked me, are you a rich and famous person? Are you a rich and powerful person? And I say, no. Okay. And she said, well, I don't know if they move the book, if nobody knows who you are. And it was just like an epiphany that the publishers really, they're after the rich and powerful, rich and famous. And if you don't have a name, they're not going to promote the book. So if I would have gotten Rockefeller Valley and Cro-Magnon 6 published, it may have sold 400 or 500 copies because the publisher wasn't going to do anything with it. They weren't going to promote it. Okay? I would have had to go out and beat the streets to tell people it's a book. But once the book said, put the book on the website, send it all over the world, these books have now been read by thousands of people. They're available in 6 continents. And God has closed the mouth of the lions for Daniel. Every time I get an idea to write another book, God shuts it down and says, no, you continue to give these books away. These books have racial reconciliation themes, they have Christian themes, they're entertainment, and I've gotten feedback all over the world about these books. They have gotten to thousands of people, and that would have never happened if I would have gotten a publisher. I actually printed out like 300 copies, and God even said, don't even do that, And he even after he did that, he said, change the name of it, which I did. Change the name of the book, because you're not supposed to do that. It was something I was getting ahead of God, So I changed it from Jude Verrett and the Nuclear. I forget what the heck I called it first. Nuclear Terror and the Jude Verrett Resurrection, I think was the original title. Changed it to Rockefeller Valley, and those books have now gotten into thousands of hands, and God wants me to keep giving them away, give them away. Maybe they'll become movies someday. If they do, I don't take any money, because God does not want me to make money off these books. So that's it, folks. I mean, it's like, you got to hear it, believe what God can do, and just please check into yourself, check what the Bible teaches, and check the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And look at how people's lives have been transformed when they accept Jesus. Read a book. I'm going to recommend 2 books, 2 authors. One, Lee Strobel, who was an atheist, a reporter, whose wife became a Christian, and he went out got angry at her and wanted to prove to her that Christianity was a fraud, and looked at the evidence, and he accepted Jesus. And the second is, for life of me, I don't remember the name of it, but it's a pastor named Greg Laurie, who wrote a book about the revival in the late 60s and early 70s, starting in California, where all these hippies and people who were in the counterculture saw the life being just leading to destruction, and how accepting Jesus changed their lives. So that's all I have to say, and please forward this testimony all over the world, because I want people to hear what God is doing in my life. Thank you. Peace and out.